Hello, PFM coming at you hot with a new video. Today's topic, as you may have guessed, is going to be about that eBay sale for that Black Label Shiny Charizard GX that actually exceeded $10,000 on eBay. And I want to talk about the Black Label, but before we can get into the Black Label, I want to introduce a concept. It's called resolving power. But what's resolving power? I'm glad you asked. Resolving power is the capacity of an instrument to resolve or separate 2 points that are close together. So right here, I have a measuring tape, and we got inches for the Americans and metric system for the rest of the world. And on this particular measuring tape, on the metric side, we have a resolving power of 1 millimeter, and on the inches side here, we have a resolving power of 1/16 of an inch. So basically, anything smaller than a millimeter, this thing can't measure accurately. So before we get into BGS, I first want to remind everyone what the PSA grading scale looks like. So a PSA, they have, as you probably already know, a scale that goes from 1 to 10 with all the numbers in between, and they also have 0.5 grades, so 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, all the way to 8.5, and there is no 9.5. Just a fun fact. And with PSA, the goal is to, for collectors to put cards on the scale somewhere. So if you have a PSA 4, and you want to compare it to, say, a PSA 9, let's say these are ungraded, for the most part, PSA does a very good job at discriminating between a 4 and a 9. You don't get many situations where you send in a card that you think is going to be a 4 and it turns out to be 9, or vice versa, right? But one thing that many people take advantage of is the fact that you can take a 9 and then crack it out and then resubmit it and then potentially get a 10, right? So you can also do the vice versa. People don't normally do this, but if you take a 10, you can crack it out and, sometimes it might get a 9. Take your 9, resubmit it, get a 10. And so when people do this, they're taking advantage of the fact that since the 9 and the 10 are very close to each other on the grading scale, the ability to resolve the difference between what a 9 looks like and what a 10 looks like is not as strong as the ability to distinguish a 4 and a 9, for instance. Right? So that's, again, resolving power. And in this case, the instrument is the PSA employee, their eyeballs. So here's another fun little thing. Everyone's favorite grade, the 8.5, right? And so the 8.5 is kind of a joke, because if I were to take this card and crack it out and resubmit it, maybe 1 in 100 times you'd get the same grade, but majority of the time you'd either get an 8 or a 9 or one of those two. So the fact that, what's the point of having this grade when PSA can't even tell the difference between this and this and this and this? So in here, there's just almost no resolving power. And the fact that this grade exists, I don't even see the point. If there's no consistency in the grading scale, then my question is, why even bother grading? The whole point is to put your card on some sort of scale that everyone understands. And if you can't do that accurately or consistently, then is there even a point to grading? So in my opinion, I don't think those 0.5 grades should really even be involved at PSA. Maybe if you're talking about $100,000 sports cards or whatever from the 50s or earlier, you're talking down here, bad condition, and the 0.5 really makes a difference, then I don't know, there's an argument to be made there. But for Pokemon cards, I don't see the point. So that's PSA. Now we can talk about BGS. So Beckett's, what they do is instead of giving you 1 grade, you get 4 subgrades, right? And each one is between 1 and 10 on an increasing scale of 0.5. So in fact, there's actually, for each of the 4, there's 19 possible grades. And you might say, 19, what doesn't make sense? There should be 20. Well, read them and weep right here. Since there's no 0.5 grade, there's actually 19. You can pause the video and count if you don't believe me. And the fun fact about this, the fact that basically you have 4 numbers chosen from here. If you look at every combination possible, it's 19 times 19 times 19 times 19. So in fact, at BGS, there are 130,321 different possible combinations of grades that you can get. You might say, well, that's dumb because I don't care about anything that's like on this side of the scale, so most of those grades don't even affect me. Well, if you only look at things that are 8 and more, so these grades, there's actually still 125 different possible combinations, which is insane. I don't have a BGS card here to show you, but if I were to crack one out, what's the probability of it getting the exact same 4 subgrades? And if it's not getting the same 4 subgrades, there's no consistency, then why bother? So because the Beckett scale, you have 4 subgrades that look like this, you can draw the scale like this, where we have 4 being the lowest grade, which is 1, 1, 1, 1. And then 40 is the highest grade, which is 10, 10, 10, 10. 10, 10, 10, 10, 4. Yeah, okay. And so, in fact, it was 76, that's 19 plus 19 plus 19 plus 19, 76 points you can land on here, potentially, between a 4 and a 40, if you were to sum up your Beckett's grades. And to remind everyone, here's the grades that really matter for Beckett's. You got your Black Label, which is straight 10, so literally right there, the 40. And then we have Pristine, which is a 10, and it's when you have a 10, 10, 10, and a 9, 5, which is literally 1 point away from perfect right there. And then if you have 2 9 5s and 2 10s, then now you're not even in 10 territory anymore, you're in 9 5, which is literally 1, 2, 3, the third from the end. So for the most part, all 3 of these on this scale are only confined within this region. And we can compare that to the PSA one, just as a reminder. So one of the questions I always ask is if PSA has a difficulty determining the difference between these two sometimes, then how much can we really trust Beckett's to determine the difference between these 3 grades right here? So we have the PSA grading scale and we have the Beckett's grading scale. If we took them and we put them on the same scale, we can use this measuring tape. Let's say 1 is like the lowest condition card, so a PSA 1 or Beckett's 1, 1, 1, 1. And then a 10 would be your ultimate perfect card. There's no better than this, right? And so, you have a PSA 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So when in Pokemon, people care for PSA, basically between here. And some people only care about that. So reminder with Beckett's, we have this. You have your 10, 10, 10 perfect Black Label, and then 195 is Pristine, and then the 95. And we're talking about the grades that are here. And so if we were to map this onto our measuring tape, reminder, this is a PSA 9, this is a PSA 10. The Beckett's Black Label. Let me hold the camera straight. Where is there it is. It's between here, the 10, and this dot. And it's actually the difference between a Black Label and the Pristine is like 1/5 of this tiny interval right here. Approximately 1/5 of that. And so that's the resolving power that Beckett claims to have when they say there's a difference between a Black Label and a Pristine. I'm going to break out an analogy for you guys. I think I wrote a post about this on E4 a while back with the same analogy, so if you've already heard it, then just bear with me. Let's say we have gold, and this gold bar is 99.99% pure gold. Let's say this one is 98% pure gold, right? So obviously this one is pure. Just looking at the number, people would probably prefer this one. Let's put prices on these. So let's say this one is $300. And let's say this one is $1,000. I mean, some people might prefer this because it's cheaper and it's still gold. Some people, they might have finer taste and they say, well, this one's more a higher percentage of gold. It's better for me. I'm pretty hoity-toity, whatever. I'm gonna buy this one. Fair enough. But if I told you one additional thing, let's say the tool used to measure the purity of gold has like a 3% error rate, right? So now we're going back to resolving power. So basically the tool I'm using to measure the purity of gold can't really resolve the difference between these two values because they're too close. So in fact, even though this one looks like it's higher, the tool is not even able to distinguish them. So there's no way to actually know if this one's higher or not. So in this setup, it really doesn't make sense to pay more for this because you could be getting an inferior product. You're just trusting an inaccurate tool, right? So in fact, you could argue that this is the better choice. If I change the situation to look like this, still have that 3% error rate, well, maybe you just prefer that one because it's the same price, but you can say you bought something that's 99.9%, even though you don't really know if it is. There's probably a better chance that it's pure. So if they're equally valuable or equally priced, I'd probably prefer that one too. But let's say instead we have this. Okay, and let's say instead of gold, we're talking pristine and Black Label. You can probably see where I'm going with this. My question now is that in reality, we don't know what this percentage is for Beckett's. I don't know how accurate their grading is because in order to really figure out what this number is, you'd have to basically take a bunch of these and crack them out and resubmit them over and over again to kind of get like a statistic here. So depending on what this value is, in reality, their error rate between their resolving power, depending on the resolving power of Beckett's, it might never make sense to buy this because literally they might not be able to tell the difference between a Black Label and a pristine. And based on how PSA does it, if they can't really often tell the difference between a 9 and a 10 or an 8.5 and an 8 and an 8.5 and a 9, and people working at Beckett's aren't any more superhuman than the people at PSA, then my question to you is, why would you pay this for a Black Label?